Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, may I have your attention, please? Are you ready to engage in a mind-blowing experience and hear talks about life, technology, entertainment, and business? The next episode of HIPTHER Talks starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HIPTHER Talks. My name is Jasper, and I will be hosting today's discussion where we'll be taking a look at the Digital Services Act, the new set of regulations introduced in the EU, aiming to, quote, create a safer digital space where the fundamental rights of users are protected and to establish a level playing field for business, end quote. Joining me today is Pál Boza of Tremau, a Paris-based company. Pál, thank you for joining me. And before we start, I will ask you to introduce yourself in a bit more detail.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation today. As you said, I'm co-founder and CEO of Tremau. Tremau is a company which is actually focusing on making the digital world safer and a beneficial space. In general, we develop human-centered software and AI systems to make sure that the digital space can become safer for all of us using it. And it's really important to today's discussion because the Digital Services Act is going to very significantly influence this space in the future years. And I can say just in advance that this new regulation is going to be probably as important or not even more important than was the GDPR for the privacy space a few years back.
Okay, so it is clear that you supposedly know a lot about this part of the regulations. What is the Digital Services Act? In short, what is its aim?
Yes, so you mentioned some elements of the Digital Services Act, which are very important, but let me focus on one aspect, which I think it's really important. So it's currently online platforms are not responsible of the content, or I just in general I would say they're not responsible of the content in general that is posted on their website. So the so-called user-generated content is freely accessible. And when the European Commission has introduced or started to discuss this new regulation, the motto was that what's illegal offline should be illegal online as well. So basically, this is a kind of way to establish a very strong transparency and really a clear accountability framework for online platforms in general in Europe. And this is not only for European platforms, but it also relates to all of the actors who have any kind of business activity or who have users in the European Union.
Does this refer to all platforms or only specific sectors which will need to comply? And who will be more impacted, operators or users?
Yes, it's a very good question. I mean, who will be impacted? Both of them are going to be impacted in a sense. But let me go into that into more details a bit later. Also, but it's not sector specific, so it can affect all kind of sectors. But what's important that it defines several categories, and it defines intermediate services, hosting services, online platforms, and very large online platforms. As I have enumerated them, the requirements or the liability regime is getting stricter and stricter as we go up on this scale. And but I would say that and these requirements are additional. So I'll give you an example. The very large online platforms are going to have very strict requirements, meaning about all kind of transparency reporting, about notice and actions, meaning basically that if there is an online content which is user generated. So for instance, I post something online and you see this post online, then basically, and you think this is illegal or harmful or against the terms of use of the given platform, then you can send a notice to the given platform. This can be a marketplace, this can be a social media platform, or this can be any kind of app or something which is related, for instance, to the gaming industry, since the gaming industry also have user-generated content. Once this notice happens, then the platform is going to have to transparently put in place and start a transparent process to make sure that for all of the persons or the entities being in this process, it's clear what's happening. So, and if, for instance, I give an example from the gaming industry, if I post something in a chat which is let's say racist, and it's being noticed by you, then in that case, the decision can be from the gaming platform to delete my account, or I can be penalized in different way for this act. However, when this act is being taken care of when I'm being acted upon, then I need to receive the clear details and the clear reasons why I have been banned from the given service. And this was just, in a nutshell, a very simple example of how the process is working. But online, so as you see, and I'm coming back to this, users are going to be impacted, and both online platforms are going to be impacted in this process. But what does it mean for online platforms? So in condition of the different categories where online platform will fall, we have the very big online platform who have more than 45 million users per month in the European Union. There will be dozens of these, probably no more than that. They will have very strict actions to take based on the new law. For instance, a very strict transparency reporting, which means to let the authorities exactly how many content has been deleted, what's the percentage of illegal content that was deleted on their site, what's how many users have been banned. So there is going to be a very detailed template for these transparency reports, but also will require to do an audit each year by the European Commission. We'll also have to publish loads of information and also provide information and being in touch with so-called trusted flaggers, who are basically NGOs who are going to monitor their activities. Some of these requirements will be the same for online platforms, who are one category below the very large online platforms. And most of the platforms who have user-generated content on their website, on their site, will fall in this category. So approximately, and this is based on the estimation of the European Commission, approximately a bit more than 10,000 online platforms are going to be impacted, just those who are based in the European Union by this new regulation.
Yeah, so based on what you just said, it seems to me that these are quite significant regulations, significant limitations to what these online platforms are allowed and not allowed, or required or not required to do. What is the general response towards this new legislation?
I'm not aware of the response of the whole companies, but this has been a long process until the European Commission has got here until publishing this new regulation, of course, as usually with all regulations in the European Union, there is a process of drafting one regulation where you have an impact assessment, where you have discussions going on with all the company or the ecosystem. So clearly, if I can approach from one point, clearly everyone is saying that this is going to be impactful. This is going to require a significant effort on behalf of these platforms. But also something maybe even more interesting is that we are in discussion on a daily basis with different online platforms, even with major online platforms, and some of them are still not 100% sure whether the regulation is going to affect, and if it's going to affect them in what sense. I give you an example. Again, staying with online gaming world. So, for instance, an online gaming company can have dozens of online games. Some of these games are maybe multiplayer games, and they have, for instance, user-generated content in forms of chat rooms in the game. So the regulation says that if user-generated content is not an auxiliary service of the platform, so basically, if it's really part of its core activity, the user-generated content, then it will fall under the new regulation. So, in a sense, there needs to be a first look at this regulation from the point of view whether the given organization or platform will fall under it, and also to say what kind of activities or what kind of in the case of the gaming industry, what are the games that will fall under the DSA, and this needs to be done for each case by case, in fact.
Okay, so monitoring content. How is content monitored, and is it easy to identify malicious content? You had an example about a racist comment, for example, but maybe there are cases where the malicious content hides in plain sight. It's not as easy to spot it. What exactly constitutes illegal content?
Yes, so the Digital Services Act doesn't define what's legal or illegal, and that's not the aim of it. This is being put under the responsibility or being sent to the given member states, since what is illegal is not always the same for each member state, and I can give several examples of that. But in general, in most of the cases, the law is the same. So we kind of know on a European level what can be illegal, but there are of course some differences, as I said, on the member state level. Having said that, and coming back to your question, is malicious content identifiable, or what is illegal content? This is, I think, illegal content is easier to define because it's defined by the law. However, what is malicious content? How we define it? It's also, in a sense, case by case. What's important is online platforms have to be in line with their terms of services when they define their policy of what they mean by ethical or malicious, or whatever. They need to be in line with what they've written down. And of course, if something is illegal, for instance, terrorist content, then that needs to be dealt with in an illegal way, or in a way which is already where you deal with illegal content. However, and to your question, how is this content monitored? I mean, this is in several sectors you already have means for that, where you have softwares to process it, and where you have the detection part of when you are trying to automatize the detection of the different type of content, either let it be illegal or let it be non-ethical or harmful content, as we usually call it. So these tools are there, and I don't think that the regulation will change fundamentally the detection part, but I can go into more in details on that as well. But what's going to be important, that the process of content moderation, which is, and different companies have different processes for the moderation of content, how they store the data, what data they can aggregate from the content moderation process, how they are sending information towards their users. I mentioned some of these points already. This process will be a very well-defined process, and they will have to stick to it. So it's not how we identify the content, but what is really defined is, once we have identified the content, what do we do with it afterwards?
Okay, what does this monitoring process mean for operators in terms of finance? Because as you said, this will be the responsibility of operators, and they will be made responsible for the user-generated content on the platforms. Does that mean a huge change? Again, asking from a financial perspective, is it easy to comply to these new regulations, or do companies need to make huge investments in order to be able to comply to all the requirements?
It's a great question, and at the same time quite complex. So there are companies who have already sophisticated content moderation processes, sophisticated detection for different type of content, and maybe they will have less burden to comply with these new regulations. We are in discussion with several companies, I have to say, and we are helping them to get prepared for the new regulation. But I usually, there is always parts of the process which needs to be aligned with the new regulations, even for those companies who have done a huge work already from side of the content moderation process, for instance. But in general, what we see is that there is quite a bit of a work to be done on the process side to be aligned with the new regulation. I cannot say how much it's from a financial perspective, so meaning what kind of investment it will mean from them. By the way, the European Commission has some kind of estimation in its impact assessments related to this. But you can. Companies have already different tools which are, I would say, partly in line with these new requirements. Our aim, if I may speak about this as well, was to develop really a tool which is both in line with the new regulation and both in line with the business needs of the companies. So, and I think this is going to be a way forward, is to be efficient and at the same time compliant with these processes. And just let me add one more thing. So I talked about the detection part in the process, and I also talked about the processing part. The detection part is there will be some requirements, but mainly for the very big online platforms. For the normal so-called average online platforms, the detection, I mean the automatized with artificial intelligence, with machine learning, and any kind of automated detection is not a requirement. What is required is that if there is a user who sees some kind of content which is not aligned with, let's put it that way, then that person can notify the platform about this content. So this is, or of course, some kind of detection from the side of the online platform.
Yes, I asked this question because while doing my research, I also came across, I suppose it's somewhat a relatively extreme view, but I came across some information claiming that especially these very big online operators, online platforms, would be required to make such a big investment that it might even be, to a certain extent, more financially efficient to not comply with these rules and pay the fines. Again, I suppose this is somewhat of an extreme view. So, do you think that really is a possibility? Or not really?
I definitely don't think that's the good way forward to think about. So I haven't mentioned, but the fine in the Digital Services Act is up to 6% of your global revenue, which is a huge amount. So it has been put in that into that level to make sure that everyone will go in towards compliance. By the way, I don't think the cost of compliance is nothing near this amount. It's definitely not that. It's resource driven, but we are more. I mean, of course, it's question of size. Probably compliance for the very large online platforms, and I don't want to name any company, but for one of the big social media platforms, they have already the tools in place. Of course, it's a question whether they can do all the functionalities or all the legal requirements, whether to do a transparency report where they need to aggregate all the data concerning their content moderation activities, for instance. That's a good question to ask. But this is where we try to help. Is basically to automatize and provide a tool which is basically compliance as a service, and it can be used as a SaaS product during and can be very easily scalable.
Okay. Now I again have kind of a how should I put it? Kind of a weird question, maybe less about the specifics. So EU representatives often claimed that the DSA aims to safeguard people's rights to freedom and freedom of expression and freedom of access to information. While I do see, obviously, how aiming to prevent manipulation works towards this goal, isn't it also, again, to a certain extent, counterintuitive as well, because the new legislation also deems some content illegal, which is technically a limitation in some sense to user-generated content and thus freedom of expression, let's say, even if we are talking about, again, I completely understand. I'm trying to find the bits and pieces that, let's say, where they are. There are holes in the system, even if we are talking about extreme views, even if we are talking about content which in general isn't necessarily supposed to reach a lot of people.
Yes.
Doesn't it limit?
I understand the question, and it's a great question, of course, and there are many debates around it about the question of free speech and content moderation, and I don't think there is it's not white and black as usually things in life. The approach is that if I'm an online platform, I would like to create my own ecosystem. What is my ecosystem is where my users feel comfortable and where they want to be present, and maybe some platforms have very different ecosystems. So when you're an online platform where most of your users are, for instance, children, then you will have special rules or terms of service from their perspective, and you can think of many different type of content of online platforms. So in a sense, there is no change about what's legal or illegal with the DSA. As I mentioned, what was yesterday illegal will be still illegal tomorrow. It's more the responsibility of the accountability of the online platforms that is going to change, and they will be taking probably more actions on the user-generated content. And I don't know, it's a speculation. It might lead to what you call censorship, but this is the right balance which need to be taken. And as I said, it's up to them to live with this. I have talked to we are constantly speaking with online platforms. One of my again, a gaming company was saying that we don't have an issue with content moderation today because our users create their own system or their own ecosystem. So if people who don't behave as the community would expect them to behave, they are very quickly kicked out by the community itself. And this is where the user notices come into action. They notice the online platform, and basically they will ask them to leave or just delete their account. Or there are many different ways to actually scale down the activities of these type of users.
Is there a danger to users abusing this system?
Yes, probably there is. I mean, one thing that yes and no in a sense. So you might be thinking of some user who is notifying content all the time, and notifying content, for instance, from the same posted from the same users. So I give you an example. For some reason, you have a problem. We have a conflict with each other, and whatever I post on an online platform, you will be notifying it. But it can be a problem. But there are mechanisms, and these mechanisms need to be there, where this content will be looked at by moderators, definitely. And when 10 out of 10 times it's clear that there was no issue with the content which I have posted, then there might be repercussions from the person who towards the person who tries to basically not use the notice opportunity in the right sense.
Okay, that's reassuring to hear. Okay, so as we are slowly nearing the end of our discussion, a quick lightning question, let's say. Do you think that the DSA is reasonable and even optimal legislation for content regulation?
I think it's a good step forward, definitely. I think that the regulators have spent a lot of time discussing with the industry, and they have not put down requirements which come out of the blue, just without any business sense. And clearly, the regulation also tries definitely to take into account the business needs and the business logic of these online platforms. At the same time, user-generated content has exploded in the past years, and I can only repeat what has been said by the Commission. What's illegal offline needs to be also illegal online, and the online platform have to have an incentive make sure that they play a role in this game.
Okay, lastly, what's your future outlook on digital content in general? What I mean is it increasingly more difficult for operators to remain independent, to comply with all these regulations, or is this just a natural change in the legislative environment?
I don't know if my answer will be totally in line with what you're trying to ask, but basically the regulators this is a big change compared to what was there previously. I made the example of I've given the example of GDPR previously. And I think it's as usually the European Union is only making the first step. And other countries will not only follow soon, but I have been already thinking of similar legislations, regulations during the past years, and they have been in negotiations and trying to discover what would be the way forward. I'm very curious how this is going to happen. I'm positive about this. As I said, I think it's a good way into the good step into the good direction. Of course, these type of regulations are to some extent have to be seen how they work in practice, and I'm sure that if there needs to be, then there will be adjustments basically on the needs of the sector. But this is to be discussed going on forward, and I think that user generated content will be thought of and will be dealt by online platforms in a more accurate, in a more responsible manner in the future.
Well, I'm also curious to find out what the future has for us, and hopefully you are right, and we will continue to see positive change in this environment as well. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it, the Digital Services Act, the new set of regulations introduced in the EU. My guest today was Pál Boza. Pál, thank you so much for being here today and for answering my questions.
Okay.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for sticking around and for listening to our podcast. Again, you can find us on almost all streaming platforms and on YouTube as well, with the video material included too. Okay, thank you again, and see you next time.
Thank you for joining. Be sure to check back next week for the next HIPTHER Talks and subscribe on Amazon Music, Overcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Mixcloud, and Pandora.